Well, I was just going to I'll just run through this presentation really quickly. Can everybody see the PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So I'm going to limp through this, and Anne, you let me know if I'm just really butchering it. So this is the agenda for the meeting today. We're going to do an overview. We already did our introductions, and Anne is going to give a presentation on the PAD and the effort that we're talking about today, and then we'll have a brief roundtable discussion at the end of the meeting. So a general overview of the California Fish Pass, of the CDFW management regions. And this is what we're going to do today. Oh, where we go. The California Fish Passage Forum is a national fish habitat partnership that includes these partners. We have 7 strategic objectives, including funding worthy fish habitat removal projects and removing barriers, improving collaboration, information sharing amongst agencies and organizations working on these goals, collating and elevating resources for practitioners, increasing access to simplified and alternative permitting options. So it was great to see somebody here from the Green Tape Cutting the Green Tape Initiative, and outreaching successes for fish passage restoration. We also work collaboratively with Pacific Marine Estuarine Fish Habitat Partnership and the Pacific Lamprey Conservation Initiative, whose boundaries overlap with the California Fish Passage Forum. We have a strategic framework that we just passed, and it is on our website, so feel free to look at our website. We have all of these resources there. I'm going to move through here. And most of you know that we do have a funding program through the National Fish Habitat Partnership, and we award about $250,000 to $350,000 every year for worthy fish passage barrier removal projects. We funded 4 projects in FY24. Some of you may be familiar with some of these projects. We have a few upcoming events I want to highlight today. In particular, we're having a webinar on a notice of funding availability with the National Culvert Removal, Replacement, and Restoration Grants. So that's going to happen on Thursday, July 11th from 1 to 2. And I encourage you to visit our website to register for that webinar. So Anne, I believe it's you. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you. Do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, so I will be providing an overview of PAD and also talking about this PAD update effort. And I will also be providing information on priorities, but Andrew is the Fish Passage statewide aquatic connectivity coordinator who creates these priorities with the help of the CDFW regions. Okay, so he can answer your questions at the end. So PAD, it's a statewide inventory of fish passage assessment, mainly in anadromous waters. It was created over 2 decades ago. Initially, the focus was on the coast, and then has now been expanded into the Central Valley and up into the Klamath. So now it's about, there's over 26,000 records. We do rely entirely on information from outside sources. So that includes agencies, organizations, tribes, local watershed groups, consultants, many of you who are on the call today, or your colleagues that you work with. So passage assessments, they vary. They can vary from single assessments conducted at a particular site or structure, see a lot of those, to broader scale assessments done on an entire watershed. There's also assessments based on structure ownership, such as Caltrans. Caltrans has been doing a lot of assessments statewide the past few years. So protocols, they also vary from less rigorous professional judgment to more rigorous hydraulic modeling. In between, you have rapid assessment protocols that determine whether likely isn't a barrier, needs further analysis. And these are usually analyzed further through a green, gray, red filter, whether it's CDFWs or US Forest Service green, gray, red. CDFW is focused on salmonids or passage, valuing passage of salmonids. So, or at least it's salmonid focused. So, not a barrier, as you can see. Red, complete barrier, although conservative. And then gray needs further analysis, usually through hydraulic modeling. Typically, fish crossing is used for evaluating passage at road crossings, whereas HECRAS is used for valuing passage at dam-like structures. However, they both determine or estimate passable flows to species and life stages. So PAD includes both anthropogenic natural features. If you're not muted, you're welcome to, but okay too, it's not distracting me too much. So we have some examples here, but not a ton. We have concrete channels, we don't have too many of them, dams, we have large and small, natural waterfalls, but also gradients. Potential and confirmed obstacles. Those potential ones are those that need further analysis, and as I mentioned, might need a more rigorous assessment done. And then confirmed might have had that assessment done, whether it was one of the hydraulic models or, using a detailed survey or a red, green, gray filter. Okay, so then also we include non-barriers and total, there's non-barriers and total barriers. Non-barriers are those that were assessed as not a barrier at the time. We also include remediations. We track those. And in many cases, sometimes they might not be successful at the time. So we'll have notes on that and keep tracking it until passage is successful. And then we have barriers at specific flows into certain species and life stages. We refer to this as temporal and partial barriers. Diversions, it wasn't in the beginning that we tracked this, but at least over the last decade, we have been tracking diversions in the PAD and identifying whether screened or unscreened. Largely, they're in the Central Valley. We do have some all the way up into the Sacramento River Basin, the area we're talking about today within CDFW Region 1. So there's lots of information in the PAD, but this is what I see as the most critical information. The type of site structure, I provided some examples, showed you a concrete channel, but there's also road crossings. I mentioned dams. There's also grade control structures and others. I'll be showing some examples next few slides. Barrier status, we track that. It's very important, whether it's say a complete barrier or some partial temporal barrier, not a barrier. Or not, or need further analysis, basically the unknown, unassessed. Protocol used, this way you can filter or see what protocol was used, if it was a less rigorous or more rigorous protocol. And then treatment information. I mean, as I mentioned, we are tracking remediations. Some of the treatment information we have is whether it was completed, when it was completed, and what was done, essentially. If there was a fishway installed or if it's functioning, we track that information too. So location, of course, that's really important to know where it is on the landscape. Those are all required in order to update PAD. The other few things aren't, however, they are important. They aren't at this time, at least, required. Ownership, it's important for many to know whether it's state-owned, whether Caltrans owns it, or say privately owned or federally owned. And this is something I'm hoping to also clean up and trying to clean up during this process, update process. Species and life stages. We have added probably doubled, or nothing tripled, double the amount of information, at least in this. And it has been visible for several years now, or at least a few years, in BIOS and various public tools. We don't have them for every record, but we're trying to. It's really important. I mean, especially when you're talking about prioritizing barriers for removal or remediation, it's important to know what species and life stages that the barrier impacts. And then habitat quality and quantity. Love to have more of this. Of course, this is also used in prioritization efforts. It's really largely in the notes, and we have a little bit as provided. And then photos, I mean, I find them really critical. Again, not required, but I encourage photos because we've probably tripled the amount of photos in the last decade, and or if not more, and they really tell a story. For one, you can often see how severe the barrier is in many cases, and for remediations, you can see before and after, like this one, this Caltrans project on Salton Creek. See the double culverts that was replaced with a bridge. And this is just a video. I think we have a link in the pad that shows salmonids swimming upstream afterward. Okay, so I mentioned I would talk about some site types. These aren't going to be all of them in the pad that we have, but these are the most prevalent also in the region that we're focusing on right now. So road crossings, those include culverts, bridges, low flow road crossings, also referred to as fords. Also dams, large and small, same with diversions, large and small pumping plants or diversions. Non-structural, as I mentioned, falls, waterfalls, but we also have gradients. And then utility crossings, not necessarily prevalent, but you will see them in this region and throughout the state. Okay, so barrier status is in PAD. You know, this is clearly not a barrier. You have this is a complete barrier, very large dam. And then this is what a partial barrier, basically in this case, is a barrier to adults. I'm sorry, not a barrier to adults, but a barrier to some juveniles. And temporal barrier, two examples, actually, yeah, where it's a barrier at low flows, but not high flows. So we also include, like I mentioned, unscreened or screened diversions. In this case, unscreened diversion in the pad is something that either doesn't have a screen or doesn't meet CDFW and NOAA criteria. Mesh size is too large in this one. In this example, that doesn't meet criteria. And then you have a screen diversion, and it's identified as screen in the pad if it's screened and also meets CDFW and NOAA criteria. So in preparing this slides today and updating Region 1, I was kind of surprised we don't have a lot of data actually in Region 1 comparatively to the state. And this wasn't necessarily, or Region 1 inland at least, the Sacramento River Basin. And that just might mean that we need to add more. There might be some that need adding as well. So this effort, hopefully a lot of you who will review it or your colleagues or staff will provide updates as well as additions, basically anything that we need adding. But basically this is what this is showing is largely there's more dams in this region comparatively, some diversions and road crossings as well. And then again, barrier statuses, quite a bit unassessed. Just note that these two slides are actually just everything but Caltrans records. The reason is because the this expert review process is really focused on non-Caltrans records. I should be discussing this more in the next few slides. So basically, Caltrans has been doing a lot of assessments throughout the whole state, as I mentioned earlier, and they're constantly, I see the data live and I update it. And they also provide me updates through their fish passage advisory committees, fish packs. And so we're really trying to focus on making sure the rest of PAD is also updated. And so in order to access PAD, if you want to look at it in further detail, the main location for accessing PAD is really the PAD program page on CalFish. You have different tabs, but one, you want to access the data itself, you look at the data access tab, and with there you have a PAD data portal query. I think it's still down. They had some security issues, excuse me. But I still wanted to show this because it should be up and running hopefully in the next month or less. It's hosted by CDFW, and they let me know about a month or less ago that there was some security issues, so they're going to be changing it a bit. But what's nice about this when it is up and running is that it's updated the day after I make changes to the PAD. And so you can export as a CSV, bring into Excel if you want to see it. You can query it by a certain county or by a watershed. Also, these little pages mean there's documents associated with those records. So it might be an assessment. And those are handy. I will point out these little globes mean that it'll link directly to a zoomed in, I think it's zoomed in, or at least it'll a link to in BIOS, and you'll see information about that particular location. So here's BIOS. BIOS is very handy. I will say that this is updated less frequently, about 3 times a year. And but what's nice is you can overlay it on other layers, such as say some species distribution layers, and or priorities, CDFW's priorities. You can overlay that, and priority don't have a lot of information, so you could, if you wanted to find out more information, you could look at the PAD. What's nice is if you go from that PAD program page, it's preloaded, so you can just open it. It'll open to this, and then you can just click on a location and look at it, or even query it. So PAD, we also years ago made PAD available in Google Earth. A lot of people like using Google Earth, especially we often use it ourselves. So it's also updated at the same time. BIOS is up, the PAD layer in BIOS is updated. And what's nice is the historical imagery that they have in Google Earth. So in this case, you can see hair dam removal over time. So the main reason that we're here is really the PAD implementation plan. So we were aware that there was a lot of information that wasn't updated in PAD. We would find out by having people send us information not updated, or ad hoc doing reviews, or trying to do it county by county. So we really needed a strategy to review and update PAD statewide. And I created it, got input first actually from Pacific States and CDFW, and then turned to the forum, Science and Data Committee, and got their input, and it's been incorporated. And it's meant to be dynamic, and it has changed over time. I'll provide some examples as I go through it. But before we were to update it, we needed to really update and make sure our data standards methodology document was updated. We actually combined those two, and again got input from the forum. this is important because we're hoping to, from here on out, that all our updates, especially through this implementation plan, are adhering to these data standards. So the implementation is a two-part process. It starts with a desktop review and then an expert review. The desktop review has really been just looking at it in ArcGIS, not really with expert on the ground knowledge. Largely, it was completed by Neil Shiraga, who is no longer with Pacific States because he's gotten a state job since now, but he did a lot of the desktop review, at least for coastal region 1 down to region 4. And I'm working on region 1, almost complete with that one, but I'll give you some preliminary results. And region 1 inland, excuse me, the Sacramento River Basin, the area we're focused on, as well as region 5 before he started on. But there's also been other people who have been instrumental, and I'll explain some of that. So, should just mention the expert review. That's where we turn it over to after we can try to clean up as much as possible some of the attributes like duplicates, removing stream names and tributary, updating stream names essentially, and updating locations as we're comfortable with it. We turn it over to experts to review it. Okay. So largely, as I mentioned, the desktop review, it's reviewed out in Excel and ArcGIS Pro, probably more ArcGIS Pro. But as I mentioned, we identify potential duplicates, we check locations, and maybe move them as needed, and correct stream and downstream names. I'll often go also to sources like the original source data to see if the location just got snapped or moved to the wrong stream. So far, this is preliminary, but I think I've pretty much completed with the duplicate review. So we only found about 2% duplicates, not a lot. Stream names changes, this is both stream name and downstream names changes. What we did was we looked at both consistency issues, so spelling errors, and that's where I used Excel. And as well as spelling variations, corrected those, and then combined it in ArcGIS Pro, compared it with hydrography layers essentially. And this percentage could change, but it's as I'm still reviewing this data. Mostly I'm reviewing where it's comparing the hydrography layers to the pad. And this is just an overview of what we've done. I didn't mention, but we are moving from regions. We're going south to north. So this is actually our last region, our last regional webinar. We actually haven't completed the expert review in regions 3, 2, coastal 1, and obviously not in Sacramento River Basin region 1. But we're hopeful by this summer or fall that we'll have those completed. But we have completed the desktop reviews for those. And this is what basically has shown. There's for at least the region 1, you can see region 1, we haven't found as many name changes or as many location changes or as many duplicates as other regions so far, percentage wise. So as I mentioned, we're going south to north. And we're focused on Caltrans locations. Another thing to note is we're focused on priority watersheds identified in recovery plans. These are core and priority watersheds, as well as those candidate watersheds for reintroduction. So we are above Shasta Dam. You probably saw our map, which is here. Again, these are the watersheds we're focused on or targeted for our review. If you have any that we're open to suggestions, if you have any we should add or remove, or what you think about these. And one of the very important things we're hoping is that you will fill out this form if you haven't already to identify your watersheds of expertise. This will really help us when we reach out to you to get your review for your expert review. And you're welcome to fill that out now. I can put it in the chat at the end of this webinar, or this end of my presentation, excuse me. So let's see. Okay, so you can see it's just real simple. It takes a few minutes to fill out. You just click on which watershed you have expertise on, you put in your basic information. A lot of you already mentioned what areas you cover, but this would be helpful to us as well. And of course, you can explain additional information if you work in a certain part of the watershed in the text box below the last part of it. So, expert review step. First, identified fish passage experts. We created a list. We've been adding to it. It's a constant thing. If you know anyone else to add, or if you would like to be added, please let us know. We'll probably be reaching out to you anyway, since you're on this call. And then we hold a webinar. This is where I mentioned this kind of changed over time. We didn't hold a webinar and reached 5 where we started. And we learned later it was probably helpful. We were hoping to garner more interest. We had a good amount of review and feedback, I would say, for Region 5, even without a webinar. But we just started to hold these webinars in preparation for the expert review to really explain to experts and others what we're doing and what we're asking for. And then the next other step is to have experts self-identify their watersheds expertise. So we develop these materials and we'll be sending them to you all for your review, or experts for their review. But basically, it includes just a simple email template, some instructions. The Excel spreadsheet is what we're having your review, and the map is just helpful. We also include BIOS links, so you can see the location as well. There's a lot of information in the pad, as I mentioned. We're really focused on what we think is the most critical information that needs also is important for updating pad. We do include, so the yellow highlighted locations are what we really want you to update. The other information we have about fields are there in case you think that they need updating, but largely we think we've updated the stream names and downstream names called tributary to fields. Okay, so largely the ones we're asking you to review is barrier type and status, barrier description. Some of these might have not been updated in a long time. The location, owner of the land or structure if known, treatment information, year it was treated, the status, whether it's ongoing or completed, or in design stage. Helpful information, fish weight and type and status. This is important to pass fish weigh. So again, not reviewing Caltrans sites. You'll see that in BIOS, but you won't see that in the list we give you. And then an update pad records, and then write in new barriers, of course. What's nice is we have a little drop down menu, so you can see what choices there are. This will help us keep the data consistent as well and standardized. But for at least some of them, the notes fields you can update. This is the text fields. We would like you to fill in the reviewed, update, and reviewer comments, like whether you reviewed it, whether it needs updating. You might not know all these locations, that's fine. You could even put who I might contact in the reviewer comments. Okay, so this is really what Andrew does. I'll explain as much as possible. Excuse me, I drink some water. Okay, so CDFW puts out fish passage priority lists, as well as actually lists of water diversions for screening annually. And they created a list last year in 2023. I think Andrew's probably going to work on another list at the end of this year. But basically, the priorities are ranked using the following criteria. Some examples are improving fish migration, political support within core population, whether it's importance in the watershed, willing partners, landowners. These come from the regions, and then come to Andrew, who manages a master list and then puts together this top fish passage priority list, top priorities. And they're not just static PDFs, but they also are translated into bios, since you can see them where they are located. And this is just a link to the bookmark that you can see all the priorities since 2011. Some are missing some years, but you can see the latest as well, and just look at that. Again, if you wanted to, you could add pad for information. So next steps. We're hoping all of you can self-identify watersheds expertise. Either if you are an expert yourself, or you know someone you could send that to, or provide us a name in the chat, it's fine, we can contact them. And then wait to receive the email watershed packet from us, record, and then you can record your updates in Excel and send them back. We'll probably give you about a month and a half. And the tentative deadline is late summer or fall. So I want to thank all of you for attending, but also I thank everyone. I can't thank enough people. It's not all, really, I should thank everyone who has ever contributed to PAD, which is more than what's on this list. We just can't fit all of them on this, but thank you. And we look forward to working with you and answering any questions, really. So examples would be any feedback on the PAD plan. Are there other watersheds, like I mentioned, to add or even remove if you think that's necessary? Any partners, experts we should include? These are just some examples. And then to contact us, contact me about the PAD, and go ahead and contact Andrew about the prioritization. He's here today to answer your questions. And then again, if you need the link to PAD on CalFish PAD program page, it's calfish.org/PAD. Thank you. Yeah, that would be great.
Great. And again, what Anne said is these are the watersheds that this link refers to that I'm sharing right now. So please fill that out, and then there'll be a follow-up email packet sent to you. Is that correct, Anne?
Yes. It won't be until later. I'm still having to clean up, but yes, closer to summer, midsummer. Oh, list of species we're focused on. That's a good question. Well, generally the PAD is focused on some salmonids, and that also, but not just salmonids. I'm sorry, anadromous fish. That also includes Pacific lamprey. So, but any information you have, many of those locations that I have in the PAD might actually be non-anadromous. So I'd love to get them updated, even added just fine. We will add non-anadromous barriers to the PAD as provided. I will say the reason why it was largely focused on anadromous in PAD is generally, or anadromous waters, is generally just because of the funding. But we have a lot of Forest Service land. We have added, as U.S. Forest Service has given us data, barriers to non-anadromous species.
So we'll keep all the suggestions from the chat, and if you do have a question, feel free to shout out or put it in the chat. We have some time right now to do some more open discussions in a round robin about what many of you all are working on in the watershed right now. So what we were hoping that we could get some insight is if you could share a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and put this chat, the questions that we're hoping you can kind of think about is like what kind of inventories and assessments you're working on, or projects, monitoring efforts, issues that are impacting the development of your projects and assessments. So if you all have some insights to share, we'd really appreciate it. Andrew, did you have anything that you wanted to say?
I just want to say thanks everyone for being here, and thanks Anne for the great presentation. And that, just to reiterate, that this process really benefits from the input that we get from everyone here. So please don't be shy on getting back to us. We really put this together and worked really hard to try and make a time and place and kind of area where people are comfortable contributing and really understand how important it is to get this feedback, because the power of the pad and the effectiveness really comes from the folks who are contributing to it. So please, yeah, go ahead and send us your recommendations and updates. And the landscape's constantly changing, so we need pad to hopefully reflect that. And it takes this collaboration between y'all or other folks who may not even be here who you think could have some good feedback on this. So Ann and I are here ready to answer those questions and try and update things as needed. So thank you.
Thank you. So who here has used the pad before or contributed to it? Diana?
I use it when I review LSA permit applications.
Great. So are there folks here who are engaged with individual projects that you'd like to share a little bit about? For folks, this is a great opportunity. People working in the same watershed as you. Anyone would like to talk about a particular project in this watershed area?
Sure, I'll go first. So
Thanks,
I'm John Barrett. I'm a district manager at our Resource Conservation District of Tehama County, and we're working with Fish and Wildlife Service on Dye Creek, a low water crossing. Tricia Bradshaw's on the call. She's very aware of the project, and we ran into some challenges with the owner of the crossing, which is Tehama County Public Works. We got through 100% designs, permitting, and got through one of their engineers, and another engineer popped up and doesn't like the design, so have kicked it back to us. So we're looking at how are we going to redesign this and still be able to meet the permits, and it may not even be possible. So we're working through it with Fish and Wildlife Service. The planning and design was funded through WCB, and implementation, again, provided by Fish and Wildlife Service.
Thanks for sharing about that, John. Good luck with that. Who else would like to talk about an individual project? Ross?
Yeah, how's it going? Ross Perry with the Western Shasta RCD, so the next RCD north of John there in Tehama. We got a few fish passage projects that we've been working on, and I kind of had a question maybe, or a anecdote about using the pad recently, or getting a project submitted. But some of the projects we're working on, we have a planning grant for fish passage improvement for the Anderson Cottonwood Irrigation District siphon structure that crosses Clear Creek here in Redding. So we're working through the design process on that. We recently completed a siphon removal in North Cow Creek, and last summer implemented that, and I was able to submit that information to Ann and get it updated as a remediated barrier. So that was kind of my first intro into submitting info in the pad. And along with that, there was a project that we've been working on in another smaller watershed to the main stem Sacramento, near Keswick Dam, Rock Creek. And there's a really bad badly failed culvert that we wanted to go after funding to fix. And I first thing I did was check and see if it was already in the pad, and it wasn't. So I kind of went through that process of getting it assessed and submitted, and I wasn't really sure what the best way to go about that was, and didn't really seem like there was necessarily one way or a very clear way to do it. It was clearly a barrier, these failed culverts. So I took Patrick Jarrett from CDFW out there, who's on the call here today, to just kind of get his professional opinion, to kind of give my assessment submission kind of more clout in my eyes, I guess. And so I guess I was kind of curious with just the folks locally in this region, if there's like a better way to go about that in the future, or kind of just any input on workflow for getting new barriers assessed and getting that into the pad. If anyone has any input on that, that'd be great.
Anne or Andrew, did you have any input on that from Ross's question?
Yeah, I thought he was directing into people in the area, but
Oh, okay.
definitely, I'm sorry if you steered you wrong direction, but yeah, so I think you might have filled out like a first pass or like a rapid assessment protocol is my guess. I have to remember a year ago, but yeah, if you wanted a more formal assessment, you could certainly, I don't know who does it there, but probably, using longitude profile and at least running through CDFW restoration manuals, red, green, gray filter, if that works better. We can often identify a barrier just by professional judgment, like just bringing Patrick or someone else out. I don't know, someone with fish passage experience, or whoever, it might be you, just to identify the barrier. Again, I say it's less rigorous, but we can update that first, because oftentimes, as it's getting funding or through the process, it'll be evaluated anyway, right? Through HECRAS or some hydraulic modeling through the process in the design. So happy to add to the record now, either update it how you want it, whether you think it's a complete barrier, some sort of partial barrier, or needs further analysis, we can list as unknown, but still have a pad record. I'm hoping that answers your question, but we can get it. What I'm saying is we can get it in quickly into the pad. It just depends on how we identify it, if you want it fully assessed, or what level of assessment you want and what you need for the, basically when you're going after not only project funds, but also talking and working with others on the project, say U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or others.
Yeah, it worked well and we got it in there. I just wanted to make sure that it was kind of informal.
Yeah.
And so I just want to make sure with the local folks that was the way to do it, or if there's other way to go about it.
Does anyone locally do fish pass assessments themselves? Like longitude profiles? And
yes and no. So, we struggled with this question about like what within the anadromous fish restoration program service, what was the right protocol to use when we can really say something is a barrier or not. And so we did fund a study that was granted to Western Shasta RCD to assess all the barriers in the Cow Creek watershed in Shasta County back in around 2011 or so. And we did a pretty exhaustive search on which protocols we wanted to use. And so we did identify for things like culverts, it's a Caltrans, I think, related document in terms of assessment at road crossings. And then we used some protocols from Washington State and for assessing things like natural barriers. And so that was what we used at the time. I really haven't seen anything else. There are some protocols within the department can't remember the name of them. They were all done by Gary Flossie. It's the like fish habitat improvement protocols or working they're not working documents, but I think you all know what I'm referring to, that the department utilizes for guiding and directing which methodologies to use for restoration, monitoring. There is some information about fish passage assessment in there as well. So that's what we utilize. As for things like screens, the department does have an inventory method for assessing screens. Good contact for that is either their engineering staff like Jonathan Mann, and locally somebody like Dave Leidecker with Department and Region 1 out of Red Bluff. And but we otherwise just do a lot of photo documentation of those. We did do a big assessment effort on the Sacramento River using kayaks from Keswick down to Red Bluff to look for unscreened or inadequately screened diversions. So anyway, yeah. As for local efforts we're doing right now, we have a grant with issued to PAC states for doing non-natal rearing habitat assessment. So these would be all the non-natal streams from Keswick down to about Big Chico Creek or thereabouts, many of the streams that were assessed by Dr. Maslin with Chico State back in the late 90s. So we are revisiting those streams, and PAC States is gathering a certain amount of data to look for restoration opportunities potentially and try and put non-natal rearing streams in context with habitat use, availability, degree of importance relative to, say, main stem or perennial streams for rearing fish. We're doing a kind of a sister assessment to that, looking at just kind of a qualitative assessment for now on stream crossings at many of those streams. Same geographic footprint. Staff in our office are doing that. So we can get a better idea of if any of those crossings appear to be a barrier, and or at what point the flow drops to the point where it becomes a passage barrier in the context of just water depth. So we're looking at as many as we can with the idea of further prioritizing and identifying ones that we might want to gather more information on and also get landowner permission for accessing. So those two efforts are in the work on non-natal streams in that whole area.
Thank you, Tricia. We have a couple hands up. We'll go with Jamie.
Kind of building off of what Tricia said, we are doing that non-natal rearing program. We also have a juvenile stranding program where we go and rescue juvenile fish. And we have noticed, we've helped Ross on some of it, that some of these creeks and stuff do strand fish. And a lot of times we're out there and we just don't end up sharing that data because we're kind of, give it as people ask for it. But if there's stuff that could be included in the pad, I do feel like maybe it would be beneficial for us to coordinate and maybe add to that. Maybe we'll contact Tricia or PJ to kind of help us with that.
Yeah, definitely. You can ask what they're using protocols. I mean, we do have that rapid assessment protocol that's just like a 1-page form or 2-page form. It does include Pacific lamprey now, but it basically, it was developed, I think, in conjunction with the forum. And it just basically is sheet, but we also now have it digitally on Survey 123. If you have a tablet, we don't have too many we just need to know when it's being used, but yeah, that could be used too. But that rapid assessment protocol was essentially used for this process, which is when you're out there doing other work
Right.
and you might see a potential barrier, you flag it, and that's important. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Because I think what we're finding is, and what I'm seeing also is that there's probably a lot of barriers or potential barriers out there that are just not in the pad, especially for the Sacramento River Basin. Just looking at the numbers and also Ross's experience adding, of course, we've always added barriers throughout the state. And then maybe what you're seeing, there might be issues we need to flag or at least note in the pad.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Because all
Thanks,
of
and,
these could later have a more rigorous assessment if needed. Maybe funding is sought to find out more about what if needed, what kind of merit it is. Like I think Patricia was talking about, one thing is the CDFW restoration manual. That's kind of what I was mentioning. That's where the red green gray filter is, and it evaluates fish crossing. There's a whole section on fish crossing, how to evaluate it. And you do longitude profile. That's more rigorous, but yeah.
Okay.
thank you. John, you had your hand up? John Barrett? You're on mute if you're talking.
Yeah, sorry about that. I
That's
just have a
okay.
quick question. So, the RCD, we've done some culvert replacement projects, through some private funding, and, I was wondering, who would I talk to update the pads? Because it looks like some of these, they're still identified as, barriers, and they've been corrected. Who would I reach out? Is that Patrick?
Oh,
our
you
region?
could. You're welcome to, but you could also direct it to me or CC me.
Okay.
I can put
Cool.
my information in the chat.
Yeah, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
there's a few projects that we've completed that it looks like they're still showing as barriers, and they've been
Yeah,
they've
I
been
think
fixed.
it's hard to track all the projects down. Sometimes I'll do my own research or reach out. I often reach out to others, but I think also some people think that another person gave me the information. But yeah, it would be, if you see anything like that, easy to reach out to me.
Perfect. Thank you.
So we're going to close. Thanks so much.
Do you mind if I ask a question? Sorry, before we close.
Sure.
What is the dam relicensing that you're working on, Claudia? I'm sorry, she just wrote it in there, so I was just curious about it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was just sharing. Yeah, I'm working on it. It's a FERC relicensing. It's like one of those once in a career events. So I'm in process of learning about relicensing, but also developing a aquatic and terrestrial habitat management plan for whatever's going on with that dam relicensing.
Okay. Are you
a little bit complicated just because of past people get into bad habits, and we have directives that maybe weren't included. And so how do you go about including those to get the best, habitat plan, for example?
Can I ask you which one you're
so this is the Pyramid Dam.
Pyramid. Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Are you looking at, you're probably at the beginning, but are you looking at if it's habitat management plan, does that include like fish passage barriers above it? Is that going to be included as sort of assessment?
Yes. Yes, it does. It has a whole lot of, there's multiple species, so it's not just fish, but fish passage is included. Yes. And this is, you're right, we are at the beginning, and it was explained to me a couple of weeks ago, this is a 5-year process. So I think we'll be doing this for a while.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I was just curious.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sorry to pop that in at the last minute. You can read it later and get to me if you have questions. That's fine.
Yeah, definitely. But the aquatic habitat management plan will include like later to do fish passage assessments, right? Probably in the end of the 5-year term.
Well, some of it needs to be assessed now.
Now, okay, so it could be
We need to
sooner.
do that
Okay.
now because this is part of it's part that and multiple other types of assessments and considerations are
Yes.
part of their relicensing. So it has to be included, but
Okay.
it's not their plans they're not detailed, and they don't meet the, use of best science for developing the plans for the relicensing purposes. So that's one of the main things I'm working on.
Okay. Do you help them?
Aside from the water flow and sediment and all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So who's responsible for the fish passage assessments? Is it them for the relicensing, or is it someone else?
We're looking at that as a forest. We're looking at what they're proposing, but they are putting forth their plans. But right now, it's very general. And so I'm thinking ultimately we're going to approve or not approve, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get to them to a point where they need to include the necessary details and use some best science and really outline what they're going to do, how they're going to manage this, how they're going to monitor, what they're assessing, and just details. We need the details.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'll be curious when the plan comes out. Curious.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I can update you.
Yeah, wonderful. I see Patrick's question. Very good question. Yeah, I think that would definitely help. So I don't know if I'll just read it. Everyone didn't see it. Are there plans to host a field training session using the California Salmonid Stream Habitat Restoration Manual to identify barriers? Excellent question. You're probably thinking somewhere up in the area. Anyone know of any of that going on? If not, are you interested? Who's interested? And we can bring it back to the forum. What do you think, Andrew? Or maybe there's other avenues to pursue?
I think if there's enough, interest in it and it's being requested and folks find it really beneficial, then it's definitely something we can consider.
So yeah, if you just put your thumbs up so we know how many people are interested, keep putting your thumbs up, that might be helpful. Or raise your hand.
Yeah, this is Patrick. I just thought it'd be a good idea to host some kind of training, in response to Ross's question about just identifying these barriers in the field. Yeah, I had a training over 10 years ago, and that's how I got trained to do the longitudinal surveys and use all the level equipment to input data into fish crossing. But that was years ago. But it seems like it'd be worthy of hosting another training session for all these other people interested in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, if anyone is interested, go ahead and just indicate that in the chat and we'll keep a record of that for sure.
Also, and do we have a survey after this too? We can also throw that in there as well.
A survey what?
If we have like a post-meeting survey or something, we can include that in there as well.
Are you talking about the survey 123?
Yeah, or like a Google form or something we can also send out and have folks.
Yeah, they sent I think Trisha included the first pass one, but not the full one. And I can include the CDFW restoration manual link if you want, or that's just the paper form, that's the PDF, or I can include the first pass. It's also rapid assessment protocol for the in survey 123 if you want, or you can just reach out to me.
Are there any current training sessions that you guys know of in the state that?
In the state? Yeah. I don't know of any current ones. Sometimes you'll find that information from the Salmonid Restoration Federation, right? SRF. Sometimes they'll put them out. I know Mike Love does it. Ross Taylor does it. I was trained also, but in Region 3, out of Region 3, when Marcin Whitman was the engineer there. And there's some people who know, but I'm not aware, but maybe someone else is. I mean, Christine Pepper might be she's still on from CDFW's engineering branch. She might be aware of that.
I'm not. I think that it sounds like there's a real need for it. I think it's been a little while, and I don't know if it's COVID has disrupted our rhythm or whatever. But no, I don't know of any.
I just think that would be probably our best bet for updating the pad, honestly. It sounds like we
I agree.
kind of an idea of where some barriers are, but to really solidify that, it would be great to have a training so people are trained up to really identify the true status of these barriers.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, Patrick, because I think we're really trying to identify what need in the region is, and I agree that there's a really synthesis for updating pad. I mean, this would help. Maybe that's partly why we don't have that much information in the pad or even updated, because we just don't have, we need on the ground assessment.
I feel like more information about reintroduction efforts would also kind of put more emphasis on that. I'm way up at the headwaters of the Sacramento, and there's a bunch, even in my neighborhood that aren't on there, and I think we're just 3 dams up removed from anadromy. So the level and spatial, effort there would be informative as well.
Yeah. Are they doing assessments for these reintroduction plans or not? Or they haven't conducted it yet? Or is that in the works? Does anyone know?
I'm not sure about the McLeod, but I was just typing in here. Actually, DWR is leading an investigation in basically habitat and suitability of habitat on the North Fork Feather River above Lake Almanor. And they are planning to do additional habitat assessment. I don't know the degree to which they'll be looking at like critical riffles or low flow barriers or anything like that, but they're planning to do that this summer on the North Fork Feather River.
Jack, you have your hand up? You're on mute if you're talking. All right. Ethan.
Sorry, one more question. Anne, I think you mentioned the rapid assessment techniques, and
Yeah.
I've been looking into CRAM trainings. I don't know if that's what you're mentioning.
No, I don't think so. What
Okay.
is CRAM? I've heard of it before, but that isn't specific to fish passage, right? Is that for?
I think it's wetlands and some other.
Okay. Is
It's
anyone familiar with CRAM? Andrew or anyone else?
California Rapid Assessment Method is for rapidly assessing potential wetlands.
Oh, wetlands. Okay. That's what it stands for. Have you used that yourself in the area, the region? Or you just looked into it? Okay.
I worked at Caltrans, so they use it at Caltrans.
Okay.
It sounds like it can maybe be tailored to landforms. I think it was originally designed for wetlands, but there's maybe, a version of it that works for riparian assessments and stuff like that. But I guess, could you speak to the rapid assessment you were talking about? Were you just meaning like quickly assess, or?
Yeah, essentially, it, like I mentioned, it kind of just identifies whether it's you're asking me, right, Anne? Whether it's a potential barrier or not. It largely does seem to focus on professional judgment. The Pacific lamprey part of it, when you evaluate Pacific lamprey, that's less professional judgment. It really has some criteria that both Stuart Reed and Damon Goodman were experts on fish passage and Pacific lamprey put together, added to the rapid assessment, is helpful. We're always trying to update that if you have any ideas, but it basically has the most simple information, like what site type it is, where it's located, who filled out the information, if there's a certain height of the drop, things like that, whether it's not foolproof. It does really need further analysis. Oftentimes people will just put professional judgment about what kind of barrier status it is, but it's a good starting point. It's not, it should really be a real more rigorous, like using the restoration manuals. Green, gray, red filter or longitude profile would be best, and then running into fish crossing as needed.
Diana,
But
did
it's a
you
good
have
start to identify those.
Diana, did you have something to add? I thought yours.
It was just about how Caltrans use CRAM. That was all.
All right, I just want to remind everyone, if you take a look at the chat, the California Fish Passage Forum is having a webinar discussing the NOFO for the funding opportunity for FY23 through 2026, a National Culvert Removal, Replacement, and Restoration Grant Program. It's aquatic organism passage funding opportunity that Tricia put in the chat. So Alexander Jones is going to be hosting, is going to be speaking at that webinar that's being hosted by California Fish Passage Forum. So the registration link is in the chat. I'll put it in there again one more time. So I encourage people to register for that webinar if they want to learn more about that funding opportunity. And again, just in closing, I want to also encourage everyone to fill out that expertise, that form for local expertise for the PAD. And if there's anything, Anne or Andrew, if you had any closing remarks before we close the webinar.
I just wanted to thank all of you for joining today. I know it's summer, I'd rather be outside probably. But yes, thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of you, your updates or anything like that. Thank you. And thank you for your good questions.
All right, well, thanks again, everyone. And I've put those 2 links in the chat, so feel free to copy them and get into that survey for the expertise survey, and also I encourage you to register for that funding webinar.